So Thanksgiving, 3 planets, a meteor shower, maybe a meteor storm, and a total lunar eclipse. Yeah, November's going to be pretty great this year. Welcome to Observing with Webb, where a high school astronomy teacher tells you what you're looking at, why it's so cool, and what you should check out later this month at night. Like I said, yeah, we've got a total lunar eclipse tomorrow if you're catching this on the 7th. And we've got later on a meteor shower that's going to, well, it's going to be okay, but we'll get to that. So let's start talking about the planets, then we'll talk about the events, and then we will move on to the constellations. All right, so what planets are we going to see? Well, at sunset, or just after sunset, let's say 6, 7 o'clock, as it gets dark, you're going to be able to see Jupiter and Saturn, right? So Jupiter is going to be super bright in the southeast after sunset. Just find the brightest thing out there other than the moon, and you will have found Jupiter. And then if you look to the right, in fact, if we take a little angular measurement here, about 40 degrees to the right will be Saturn, right? It's over here. It's in Capricorn. Now, it is dimmer than Jupiter, but it is brighter than everything else around it. So you can find Saturn. And don't forget, in the telescope, these two are some of the best planets to really look at. And that's because Jupiter's got, of course, the moons of Jupiter, and the cloud bands on Jupiter, which are just amazing to look at. And Saturn, of course, has those beautiful, beautiful rings, and they're tilted pretty away from us right now, so that's going to look pretty good as well. Now, what happens throughout the night is you should notice that throughout the night, let's say we go to 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. You start seeing Mars rising up throughout the night. And so as Mars is rising up, Saturn's starting to set, Jupiter's sort of heading in that same direction, but Mars is rising. Mars rises at about 8:30 at the beginning of the month and a little bit after sunset by the end of the month. But yeah, so it's rising a little bit early, and you'll see it if you can find Taurus. Just look to in between the horns of the bull. Or if you can find Orion, just look north. And the cool thing about this planet is that it really is just red. Much redder than anything else around it. Even redder than, in my opinion, redder than Antares, which is the rival, Aldebaran over here, which is not the rival of Mars, but it's pretty close to the same reddish color, but I think Mars is even redder and cooler looking, but that's up there as well. Now, once Saturn sets, Jupiter will set eventually and Mars will, and then that's it. But if you are looking out in the morning, which I have done a bunch of mornings lately, you will be able to see Mars way up high in the southwest, about 2/3 of the way up the sky. And it is just brilliant when you have a nice, clear morning. So there you go. You've got Mars in the morning. You've got Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars throughout the night, and Saturn and Jupiter at sunset.
And a bunch of other stuff.
Now, as far as events go, I'm going to start with the moon phases. Then I'm going to talk about the close encounters. Then we'll get into the lunar eclipse. So fast forward if you want to get to that, but just by like a minute or two, and then we'll get into the meteor shower. So let's start with the moon phases, all right? So we've got the first quarter moon on the 1st, which you probably saw. Then you've got a week of evening gibbous moons. The 8th is when the full moon is, and also when the total lunar eclipse is as well. Then after the full moon, you've got some waning gibbous, a whole week of waning gibbous moons, which means it is mostly lit and rises later at night. You've got a last quarter moon on the 16th. That's when it's visible from midnight and into the morning and only half lit. Then after that, you got a week of morning crescents. Just look toward the east in the morning. And then the morning crescents will get thinner and thinner and smaller and lower in the sky. and you will eventually look and not see a moon anymore. And that's on the 23rd, the new moon. That's the darkest skies. Then you'll have a week of evening crescents from the 23rd to the 30th, because the 30th is that first quarter moon, the second one for the month. Right. Now, some close encounters going on here. We have the moon and Jupiter on the 4th. You probably saw that. Jupiter just being right nearby the moon in this perspective right here. Now, we know that the moon every night moves a little bit further to the east. It moves away, and so you might be thinking, oh, what is it gonna reach next? Here, let me go a little bit further in the night, and then I'll move forward in the days. Oh, there we go. Mars, right? So on the 10th, you will see the moon right near Mars, right there. And the moon will be about 6 degrees above and to the right of Mars. And then there are no other evening or even morning planets there, so we got to move forward all the way to the 28th. Okay, and we got to go back to sunset, and we got to look toward the west, and that's when you are going to see the moon being right near Saturn. Actually, we're basically looking south based on where that is, but yeah, you'll see a nice crescent moon with Saturn just up and to the left of that. And let's see, 7 degrees this day. And then on the next day, on the 29th, Saturn is going to be almost directly in line with the moon. The moon will have moved up and to the left. Okay? And those are the close encounters. All right, now let's get to what we've all been really waiting for, which is the total lunar eclipse. So here's what we got to do. We've got to change it to the morning of November 8th. Okay? So on November 8th, we got to get to AM. Whoop, there we go. There's the moon. There it is on the morning of November 8th. There we go. And, oh, Earth's shadow. What is going on there? Let me outline this a little bit. Okay. And so here's what we see. Let me back up a little bit. So we got the sun on the other side of us right now from this perspective, and the moon is on the other side. So we got the sun behind us, moon in front of us, and so the Earth puts a shadow into space, right? And so there is a dark inner portion here, which is called the umbra. That's the area where if you were in there, you cannot see any part of the sun at all. And then there's this other part here where if you were in that area, the Earth would only cover up part of the sun. Maybe a lot, maybe a little, depending on where you are. A lot if you're toward this line, a little if you're toward the outer line. Okay? But the point is, the moon is passing into that Earth's shadow, right? So, back to the important parts, though. The most important part is, when is this going to happen? I'm going to go with Eastern Standard Time for all of this, okay? The time should be the same, just depending on there'll just be an hour more or less based on your time zone, but what you will be able to see will change with your time zone as well. So right about there at 4:09 Eastern Standard Time, that is when the partial eclipse starts. You might say, but wait, Mr. Webb, it's in this outer portion of the shadow. It's in the penumbra. There's an eclipse. Yes, technically, but you can barely notice the penumbra. Okay, it's really hard to see that. What really is going on is this umbra. When it reaches into the umbra, that's when you really catch this, right? So basically, all you got to do is get out there at 4:09 and just look west, directly west, and you'll find the moon, no problem. And what'll happen is, starting at 4:09, let me get closer in on that. Okay. At 4:09, what's going to happen is the umbra is going to start munching away, start eating up and making that moon disappear. It kind of looks like the phases. It's not. It's very different, but that's what you end up seeing. And over about an hour and I think 10 minutes, or an hour and 5 minutes, hour and 7 minutes, okay? At 5:16 in the morning, that's when the totality begins. That's what we're looking at right here. That's when the whole moon is in that umbra. That means there is no light from the sun directly reaching the moon. There's a caveat there, right? Well, when we look at these eclipses, the moon turns this yellowish, orangish, even deep dark red, blood red, brownish looking moon. How can we see it if there's no light reaching it? Well, it's because of the atmosphere, right? So behind us is the sun. Our head is the earth, and we're looking at the moon. If we didn't have an atmosphere, the moon would be completely black. You couldn't see it at all during an eclipse. But the thing is that our atmosphere does two things. Number one, it bends some of the light in toward the moon, right? It's just like a prism. You know, the light doesn't go straight through. It kind of spreads out a little bit. And so some of it gets sort of curved toward the moon. The other thing is that the atmosphere filters out a lot of the blue. That's how we get the blue skies. The blue, the indigo, the violet, and to a lesser extent, the yellow, and to an even lesser extent, the red and the orange. And so what happens is that most or a good portion of that light actually gets filtered out through the atmosphere. It kind of scatters in the atmosphere. It's called Rayleigh scattering. And some of it gets through. And the only stuff that really gets through is those reds and orange and yellows. And that is what is going onto the moon. And that's also why we say that when you are watching a total lunar eclipse, you are literally watching all of the sunrises and sunsets on Earth being projected onto the moon. Because that's really what's going on. Every time you see a sunset, the same effect is happening, except you're on Earth seeing the light get filtered through the atmosphere into your eyes, and you see the reds, oranges, and yellows. But here, you are seeing those all get projected onto the moon and reflected back to us as well. So, 5:16 is when that starts. 6:42 a.m. is when that ends, right? So you're going to have about an hour and a half, okay, where it's going to go through, and oh no, look at that. What is that? That is my horizon. One of the problems here is that if we take a look out, the moon is actually going to set right around sunrise, or at least, yeah. So what's happening right now, at least for us on the East Coast. Now, if you're on the West Coast, you can see this whole thing. The moon's going to be very high up in the sky to begin with, and you'll be able to see the whole thing. But if you're on the East Coast area, the moon will set at some point during that totality, or at least nearby that. Okay, so it's going to start getting brighter. Okay, the sky is going to get brighter, brighter blue, as the moon starts setting and starts getting out of the partiality or out of the totality. So I just took off the horizon there. I still have the horizon line, which is here, this white line. And so even for me out in Lancaster County, the moon is it's going to be in totality while it sets. So I'm not really going to be able to see all of totality. But if you're further west, even western PA, but the further west you go, the more of this you will be able to see, because the moon will be higher in the sky for you based on your longitude, right? So anyway, if you are further west, 6:42 is when totality ends, and you get that partiality again. So let me show you what that might look like. I'm going to hide the daylight, okay, and then I'm going to center back in on the moon, and what you'll see is that up right about there, 6:42, that's when it's becoming a partial eclipse again, and then it's going to keep being partial until 7:49. And at 7:49, you basically have a full moon all over again. Yeah, technically it's still in the penumbra, but that's not what matters here. Okay? All right, so some things to notice, though, some cool parts about this, okay, is during the eclipse, you have a really cool view above the eclipse here. You can see Orion, Taurus, the Pleiades, and Mars up there. And one of the things you should notice if you start out there at 4:09, take a good look and see how much you can see, how much of the sky you can see at that time, and how many stars you can count. I would recommend going into the Hyades, that little V of Taurus, and counting how many stars you can see when the moon's full at 4:09. And then start noticing as time goes by, you should be able to see more and more stars because the moon's not putting out as much light pollution as it was before. Okay. Yeah, it's just going to be great. See if you can get a picture. Phone pictures aren't really that good, but they are getting better. In fact, I will probably be taking my new Galaxy S22 out to get some pictures. If you were looking on my Instagram and stuff, I took some up at Cherry Springs and they were great, relatively speaking. But anyway, get out there. And also get out there on the 17th, 18th, and 19th of November. What's going to happen then is the Leonid meteor shower. This is going to be great, we hope. On those nights, the Leonid meteor shower will grace us with probably 10 to 15 meteors per hour. That's typically what it is, which isn't a whole lot. However, this one can get some really good years. Could this be one of those years? Well, maybe. The Leonids, again, is typically weak, but some people, or at least one person I've seen online, is predicting that there might be up to 250 to 300 meteors per hour after midnight on the 18th. So it's really not that big of a window, and it's on the second night. So am I banking on that? No, of course not. But am I going to go out anyway? Of course. So the Leonid meteor shower, here's what you want to do to check it out. First of all, you got to find a dark location, get away from those lights, even the street lights, even the lights in your house that are leaking out into wherever you are, and get in a hammock or get in some sort of anti-gravity chair or some sort of thing that keeps you off the ground, and bundle up. Definitely bundle up. You don't realize how cold it's going to get, especially when it's clear. Make sure to check that it is actually going to be clear. You don't want to put all this effort in and have it be for naught because there's some clouds. However, here's what you do. You get out there and you look at the whole sky. Okay? If there's a direction you might want to look, it would be toward Leo. Now, Leo doesn't rise until about after midnight or so, but you want to look kind of in the direction of Leo, but you want to look all around it, because in Leo is where the radiant is. That's where all of the meteors will appear to be coming from. If you trace back every meteor, they will probably point to Leo. The thing is that as you get closer in the morning, like 2, 3 a.m., there will be a crescent moon. That's not usually too bad, but it is a little bit of light pollution, which is what you don't really want. Okay. However, if I were you, the night of the 17th, night of the 18th, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to spend at least 20 minutes. That's my big piece of advice, is just spend 20 minutes. Just take 20 minutes and just sit out there, no phone, nothing. Just sit out there and look. Take advantage, give yourself 20 minutes of silence, and just keep looking at the sky. Because looking and checking and going back and forth, it doesn't work. I've tried it many, many times, going, oh, maybe I'll see one. No, just spend 20 minutes, and if you only see one, you only see one. That's still pretty great, right? And if you see a bunch, then, well, you see a bunch. All right. So, Leonid meteor shower, get out there, see what you can see. All right, last thing is, not Halloween, Thanksgiving, the 25th. So November 25th, after you feast, I would highly recommend going outside and actually getting some good observing in, because you've got a couple things. you might be able to catch a very thin moon. You will have a 2-day-old crescent moon, and let me move this forward a little bit. You won't really be able to see Mercury and Venus. That might be coming up next month. But a very thin crescent moon. And then as you wait a little bit longer, you'll be able to see Jupiter and Saturn up there. Great telescope objects. And then a little bit later, even before 6, you should be able to find Mars over there in the east-northeast as well. Don't forget, with your telescope, you can also find the Andromeda Galaxy, and you can zoom in on the Pleiades. Lots of objects out there, but that would be me. If I was going to bring my telescope someplace, I would set it up and I would check out Saturn, Jupiter, the Andromeda Galaxy, maybe the Pleiades. Mars, not so much. It's not really that impressive in a scope. But yeah, there you go. Those are the events. So let's take a quick little trip over and talk about the constellations.
Are there patterns in our skies? Are patterns only in our eyes?
All right, so after dinner, what are you going to see? Well, you can see that little red area. That's straight up above you. But you should be able to find Lacerda up there. But you'll really be looking for Pegasus and Andromeda. Let me just move a little bit further at night. So 7 p.m., great big square of Pegasus with this little cornucopia shape of Andromeda off to the left. Just absolutely gorgeous to find. And yeah, now if we go forward a bit further, let's say before bed, so let's say 10 p.m., what you'll be finding up there is Andromeda will still be up there, but Perseus will be off to the left with Triangulum and Aries down below that. What I like to do is I like to look at Andromeda and look at that cornucopia shape and think, okay, what is it emptying out into? And it's emptying out toward Perseus. Now, Perseus has a similar shape to it. You'll see it slightly differently than everybody else when you look at it, but it kind of looks like this. And that's emptying out down toward the Pleiades and Taurus. Now, in between, sort of in that same area, you've got this Triangulum, which is a triangle of 3 bright stars. Yeah, you can make a triangle of any 3 stars, but these are 3 bright stars in that area. So it's a triangle. I'm not saying it makes sense. It's just the way it is. And then you've got Aries, the ram, which clearly those 4 look like a ram. Just another instance of us humans trying to make rams or something that rams were important for some reason fit into the night sky or something that, yeah. Anyway, we made it fit because that definitely looks like a ram. And then if you go even later, so let's say into the morning, let's see, let's go back. There you go. Right in the middle, you basically see Gemini, but I would look for Orion in the mornings because with Orion, you can find all the winter constellations like Taurus, the Pleiades over there, Canis Major, and the brightest star there, which is Sirius, is right there. I mean, just absolutely gorgeous to find. So those are the constellations. So yeah, anyway, don't forget, go out, get those eclipse shots, see if you can see some meteors, and just have a great month. It's going to be a good one. Don't forget that you can find this on mrwebb.podbean.com as a podcast, also on Stitcher and iTunes. Also, Mr. Webb PV on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And, of course, the Pequea Valley Planetarium is at PV Planetarium on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We have a star party coming up next Wednesday, the 16th, I think. And, yeah, come on out and see it. If you're on the email list, you'll be getting some details about that. But, yeah, with that, I would like to wish you all very clear, dark skies for the month of November.